Mara Kincaid kept her chin up, so the rain would run past her eyes, instead of into them. The cardboard box in her arms sagged as if it, too, had been fired. 21 years on call at Port Helix Medbay, and a single decision had ended it. She walked without looking back. If she looked back, she'd spit. The port's neon stuttered over puddles, and her reflection broke into 1,000 versions of herself, each one angrier than the last. She hadn't cared about the rules yesterday. A dock worker had banged on the side gate, breathless, repeating the same 3 words. Found a pup. The thing on his coat looked like a wolf, only if a wolf had been painted by a star. Its coat shimmered like frost, catching northern lights, each breath a fragile candle in the wind. The handler's broken standard had made the rest simple. No time. Please help. Doctor. Vale, the manager with an accountant's heart, had said no. Wild xenofauna, unauthorized specimens, no liability coverage. She'd listened just long enough to know she would disobey. Now the box with her desk plant, her mug, and a photo of her sister bit into her arms, as if it were the price of a heartbeat. The rain softened. Under the sodium glow, Port Helix looked almost kind. Mara knew better. Ports weren't kind. They were hungry. She kept walking, telling herself that sleep would come, that the knot in her chest would loosen by morning. Lies. But she was too tired to argue with herself. The pup, no, not a pup. A something had been cold to the bone. She'd wrapped its small body with thermal gauze and warmed saline, cursing softly when the monitor misread its twin heart arrhythmia as a machine error. The handler, a lanky courier with inked glyphs down his neck, had hovered in the doorway like a guilty shadow. "What is it?" she'd asked. He'd hesitated. "Sunwolf," he said finally, then winced. "That's what we call them. Real name's Ari. This one wandered out from a migratory cluster outside the tether range. The others didn't follow. Mara had worked by feel. Coax the lungs open with microinflations, rehydrate with electrolyte ratios that made no sense on paper, but felt right in her bones. She'd stopped bleeding at a hidden laceration with pressure and clot gel, then stitched the tear with threads so fine it shone like cobweb. The pup's eyes had opened once, luminescent gold with a ring of silver like a lunar halo. It had looked at her as if she was something worth remembering. Doctor. Vale had found them, just as the second heart stabilized. He'd stood there, rain steaming off his shoulders, expression careful, as if choosing which mask to put on. "You just cost us our contract," he'd said. "Security has recordings. You've documented the presence of an unregistered bioform. Pack your things." She had fought the impulse to beg because she didn't beg. "It would have died," she'd said. "Things die," he'd replied. "Budgets don't." Morning arrived like a drum. Not thunder, not engines. Something older. The apartment walls hummed until a hairline crack in the paint shed a whisper of dust. Mara stumbled to the window with the reflexes of a woman who had been woken by alarms her whole life. A ship settled out of the low clouds like a black lark fallen from a myth. It wasn't port class. It wasn't registered. The hull was made of something that disobeyed light. The surface, soaking in reflection and giving back a soft, liquid glow. It lowered onto Argo Street with the arrogance of royalty. Cars and bikes shivering beneath it. Neighbors poured onto balconies. Phones rose like lilies. Somewhere, a child laughed, too young to know fear's language. The ship's lower seam unfurled, and a ramp extended without hydraulics, without sound. Mara stood at her window until the glass caught her breath and held it. What came down didn't move like anything she knew. It flowed. 6, 8, no more lithe quadrupeds. Their coats, rippling with color like moonlight filtering through leaves. Sunwolves, if the courier had named them right. The tallest paused at the base of her building and lifted its head. Its eyes found her on the 4th floor. as if windows and walls were a minor inconvenience. Something like a voice uncoiled inside her skull, not words, but meaning, shaped into something she could receive. You carried our fallen ember through night. Come down, human mender. Her heart leaped. The knot in her chest loosened, but only so fear could fill the space. She set the box down, touched the plant once, then left. The air outside smelled like rain and ionized metal. The tall one waited in the street, others forming a crescent around it. They weren't wolves, not truly. Their paws articulated with a softness that suggested fine control. Their ears were fringed with filaments that lifted and settled in invisible currents. Up close, Mara could see thin scars braided into the tall one's shoulders, ceremonial or remembered. The courier from yesterday stood near the curb, head bowed, a line of security drones frozen above, like embarrassed birds. Of all people, Dr. Vale had appeared as well, expensive coat flapping, face stretched into an expression he thought looked brave. I am High Warden Irix of the Ari, the tall one sent, the meaning landing gently in Mara's mind. You pulled breath back into a small one of our fire. That one is called Lumi. At the warden's side, a smaller sunwolf stepped forward with careful pride. Its chest bore a thin line of scar, her scar, and its eyes contained that same lunar ring, threaded with something warmer now. It pressed its head against Mara's thigh like a grateful tide. Doctor, Vale cleared his throat. There's been a misunderstanding, he began, pitching his voice for the crowd. Our facility was prepared to. He didn't finish. A motion from the rooftops sliced the morning. Two compact drones dove with that ugly, angular purpose that only hired violence possesses. Airy filaments flared, the air singing. The drones died quietly, as if ashamed of the interruption. The warden's gaze moved past Mara, past Vale, to the far corner, where a man in a grey raincloak tapped a sleeve. Security, no privates, hunters, the crowd murmured. Somebody shouted. Somebody else swore. Irix's send was like calm water over hot stones. There are those who wish the ember to go out. Walk with us now, human mender. You are entangled in their thread. Mara looked at Vale. He didn't meet her eyes. Of course he didn't. She took a breath that tasted like decision and stepped onto the ramp. Inside, the ship sounded like hushed singing, not vocal, a resonance. The corridors curved without corners, the floor warm underfoot. Mara walked between Airy, who dipped their heads as if greeting an equal, not an intruder. Lumi trotted ahead, then back, then ahead again, giddy with life. You shouldn't have landed, she said, and her voice quivered with a fear that had taken its time arriving. Port Authority will. We are not in their sky. Irix sent, and Mara understood. He meant jurisdiction, not weather. They were warned. We branded no metal and shed no blood on your streets, unless blood came first. Those drones who sent them. The answer came as a picture. Dr. Vale's office, the logo embossed in gold on the wall. But in front of the logo, an unmarked data rod slipped into a pocket shaped for secrets, contract numbers, a line item, retrieval, xenofauna, juvenile, hunters paid by a shell company, registered off-world, not Port Helix's board, Vale. Mara felt like laughing and couldn't find the part of her that remembered how. He sold us out. He sold the ember, Irix corrected gently. You were a witness he wished to vanish along with the ember. Why me? She asked. Why bring me here? You could have taken your pup and left. Irix stopped at a membrane that opened at his thought. The room beyond was all sunrise, warm light, a shallow pool where light played like silver fish. From somewhere unseeable, a scent like burned sugar and cedar drifted through. He lowered his head and let his filaments brush the pool's surface. You did not just hold breath in a small body, he sent. You matched your rhythm to our rhythm without a name for it. That is not a trick. It is a kind of listening our young must learn, and yours have almost forgotten. We call it hear sense. We need a mender who hears. Mara put her hands in her pockets because she didn't trust them not to shake. What are you asking me to do? Not to join us on a ship as a decoration in a story. The warden's eyes reflected her, tiny and human and stubborn. To stand beside me in a hall where those hunters buy favors. To say aloud what you did while they listen with their soft ears and their hard coins. And then, if you will teach our apprentices how you matched a stranger's breath with your own. She let the offer sit between them like a hot stone and felt, under the awe, under the exhaustion, something sparking, anger's sibling. Justice. Will that put me in danger? She asked. Yes. Irex said simply. Truth is loud. The tribunal chamber was built to impress people who thought height was the same as authority. Vaulted arches, flags with seals, the murmur of translation buds, and the rustle of expensive clothing. Mara stood in the center, a single microphone stem like a weed through pavement. Doctor. Vale took his seat among the port delegates, tie straightened to a strangulation point. The hunters stood without insignia at the back, hands inside their sleeves where their weapons pretended to be hands. Airy took the gallery perimeter. They did not bristle. They did not have to. Begin, said the chairwoman, a woman whose voice had the texture of paper. State your involvement, Mara told. The simple version first, because simple stories are hard to wriggle past. A dying juvenile, a refusal on policy, an intervention anyway, a firing. Then the morning ship, the drones, the something else that hummed under her skull when the Ari spoke. We are asked to consider whether Port Helix bears liability, the chairwoman said. We are not here to litigate feelings. Then consider this, Mara replied, the words arriving with an ease that surprised her. Your risk models failed. You built policy to keep things out. You didn't build policy for when life gets in. So the model told a man like Vale to say no, and he did, and a child almost died. Then the same model told him to sell the evidence of the model's failure. He did that too. Murmurs. The hunter's eyes sharpened. Vale's knuckles went white on the table. The chairwoman's pen paused over her pad. Not writing. Irex stepped forward enough to be undeniable. We will not trade for breath, he sent, and the translators rendered it into a dozen languages at once. But we will pay for instruction, not in coin that buys knives, but in openings. We propose an accord, a shore clinic at the tether, co-staffed, to mend stray embers of any fire, transparent, audited, watched by your cameras if it keeps your other hands off the data rods. The chairwoman tapped her pen once. The room tilted, ever so slightly, away from habit and towards something else. They caught the movement because Lumi hiccuped. The small sound broke the air's grid. One hunter's sleeve flicked wrong. The second drew his hand too low. Mara wasn't a fighter, but she had taken 100 blows by proxy for people on gurneys. She knew the wind-up of harm. Down, she said. Or maybe she didn't say it. Maybe Irex did. Maybe the ship sang it. Filaments flashed. Light moved fast enough to be a rumor. The first shot skipped like a stone and died against the floor with a sizzle. The second never left its chamber. The hunters folded into themselves like paper cranes touched by rain. Silence returned, the offended kind that follows a breach of etiquette. Vale stood, face blooming red. This is outrageous, he said, and in his sputter, the crowd heard what he had never meant for them to hear. The pitch of a man who believed the rules were armor for his kind alone. From the gallery, the courier's voice cut across the room, clear with relief and anger together. He sent them. Check the rod. Security moved, like men who had been waiting their whole careers to be brave. Vale's pocket surrendered its silver secret. The chairwoman read just enough to understand the shape of it, then set the rod down, as if it might bite. "This tribunal is adjourned," she said. "We will reconvene with charges." The room exhaled. Someone laughed, a raw, unbelieving sound. Lumi pressed against Mara's leg again, and she realized she had been holding herself upright with the tightness of a drum. She let go. Her hands shook for real now. She didn't hide them. Eric's touched his brow to hers, a gesture that had not been translated for the room and did not need to be. "Truth is loud," he sent. "You were louder." They built the clinic in the shadow of the tether, where the sky seemed to lean down to listen. The Ari called it Ember House. Humans called it a pilot program because they only trusted something once they could pretend it was temporary. The first week, no one came. The second, a boy brought a broken glider bat, cradled like a baby. The third, a woman with tattoos of sea maps, brought a cask of soup and sat all afternoon just to watch the light change on the floor. Mara stayed. She had thought she might visit and go, teach and leave, but the door kept opening, and the steady work of mending built a kind of gravity she didn't resist. Apprentices arrived wearing bright curiosity like a second skin. Some had Ari filaments braided with copper thread. Some had human hands, calloused by work their parents hadn't known how to name. They learned hearsense by breathing in sync with a glider bat until tears ran down laughing cheeks. They learned stitches so small they held without being seen. On the day the first starstorm scattered green fire across the sky, a delegation from the port came with a plaque. The chairwoman spoke carefully and handed it over like a peace offering. Dr. Vale did not appear. The rumor said he'd traded his tie for a lawyer and lost both. That evening, Lumi curled by the door and watched the first snow drift sideways. The pup had grown, legs too long for grace, eyes still that impossible ringed gold. Irex stood at the threshold with the patient patience of a guardian at the edge of a wood. "You outgrew something," he sent. "Not a job, a smaller shape of yourself." Mara looked at the crowded shelves, gauze, clamps, a worn mug without a handle someone had rescued from a box in the rain, and felt a quiet that wasn't emptiness. It was room. "I thought I lost everything," she said. "You lost the world that could not hold you," Irex replied. "You got the one that asked you to listen." The storm thickened. Inside Ember House, breath mingled human, airy, something winged on a perch warmth, complicating the cold. The door swung as the wind pressed, then settled. In the hush, you could hear it if you stood very still. The shared rhythm of lives, insisting on each other. Mara matched her breathing to that sound without thinking. Hearsense, the apprentices called it. She just called it work. Then she smiled, because work, suddenly, was another word for home.